Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'd like to welcome in my next guest, Graham Couch with the Lansing State Journal, who covers the Spartans. Graham, how's it going?
Doing well. Off to an interesting start here this year, and it's good to have normal football back, so to speak.
Yeah, and I've had a chance to watch both games at Michigan State. And for people that haven't seen, they beat Northwestern handily 38-21, beat Youngstown State 42-14. And Graham, I want to get your takeaways from these first two games. Simple. We'll dive into it more in depth as we go along here. But look, this is a Michigan State team coming into Mel Tucker's second year, expected to finish last in the Big Ten East there. But they've impressed a lot of people. I'm just curious your kind of overall takeaways 2 games into this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectations sort of nationally or regionally, even for where they'd be in the Big Ten, were a little low, just given the number of transfers that came in, impact guys that they knew were going to help. I mean, they had 14 Power 5 transfers, 17 FBS transfers, many of whom are playing critical roles. So I think there was a sense that they might have the talent to be better than people thought. What has impressed me, I think, number one, Kenneth Walker, running back, is better than anybody really anticipated or knew, at least outside the program. And then the offensive line has been now again, I don't know what Northwestern is this year, and it's Youngstown State, but that is the unit that is just limited this program probably for 5 or 6 years more than any other unit, and they've looked really good. I mean, it's a veteran crew. They added a transfer from Arkansas State. It was an all-conference Sun Belt guy at left tackle, and you've just seen them be able to impose their will, which is something we haven't seen. That we kind of knew they'd have a couple good receivers. That's played out. The young quarterbacks played pretty well, and so everything they were hoping would go well. I mean, it could not have been a better start than what it's been for Michigan State at this point. There are still some questions on defense, and I think those things against Miami will be even further tested, especially in stopping the run. And they gave up a couple long drives to Youngstown State, and they gave up a lot of third and fourth down conversions. And those are things that are a concern for them. The thing is, though, the expectations aren't that they're going to win a conference title or contend for a national championship. And like for fans, happiness is always tied to expectations, right? So people right now are pretty thrilled.
As they should be. And I think conversely, it feels like it's completely on the other end with Miami. They get the win over Appalachian State, but it's 25-23. Boos going out in this stadium, get blown out against Alabama. People are just expecting more from a veteran team. Manny Diaz's third year, hoping they take the jump. And through 2 games, it feels like these programs are kind of going in different directions. That's why I think this is a very intriguing matchup, especially with what you thought Michigan State was before the year. And again, it's only 2 games in, and same with Miami. Grant, let's stick more with Kenneth Walker, because that's really where it kind of goes with in terms of being the most impressive thing with what Michigan State's been able to do. And I reached out to our buddy Les at Wake Forest to just kind of get some more insight on Kenneth. And he did expect him to be a good player at Wake, and felt like, he was actually a backup there, but did well last year. And now you see what he did in the first game against Northwestern, 264 and 4 scores, and really at all levels. I think for me and watching him, it's those backside runs Miami's going to have to pay attention to. Essentially, if it's designed one way, he'll cut back. I think he's got that great mix that you're looking for in a running back in terms of balance and speed and power. Just kind of seems to have it all going for him. What's kind of standing out to you with Kenneth? And you said they were excited about him in the program. Were they, or has the program yourself been maybe even a little bit surprised because coming out the way he has these first 2 games?
Yeah, I think in some ways, and I think at Wake Forest he was used a little bit in read option scenarios too. And I think one of the problems with that, with a guy like, is you want to let him be the vision. You want to let him make the decisions. And I'm not sure that was as well a fit as it is at MSU, which is a little more of a traditional offense. And there's no question. I mean, he's got more burst, more oomph, but I think it's the vision and the patience, and just sort of, he's a natural running back. And they've had some guys in recent years. Another part of their problem, even along with the offensive line, that have been great athletes, guys who were great quarterbacks in high school or whatever, but just didn't see didn't have the vision that he appears to have. Now they're really strong at the position now. They had an injury to their third guy, and I'm not sure he'll be back for this week, but their number 2 guy, Jordan Simmons, is a one-cut, really strong runner, good player. So that's a position of strength, and they don't have to over-rely on Walker. But yeah, no, he is even in this last game, he only carried the ball 7 times. I mean, they were trying to preserve him. I think they weren't messing around with his health, but there was a 24-yard run in which he's completely bottled up and he winds up escaping around the left side. And then there's a 6-yard touchdown run in which there's a hard cut juke on a linebacker, and then he carries 2-3 guys into the end zone. And there's something to him. They haven't had that guy with an it factor in a little while.
Yeah, and that run was crazy against Youngstown State. Essentially, it felt like 3 yards to the right, 3-yard gain. Then all of a sudden, he reverses field. It was pretty crazy. And you mentioned that power that he showed on the touchdown run. I thought it was good what Michigan State did. Preserve him a little bit, give Simmons some run. Like I said, looks like he's a capable backup for sure. But I think, from a Miami standpoint, Manny Diaz is he spoke a little bit pretty confident after the second game that he feels like maybe this run defense is coming back to what it used to be. And I feel like you're certainly going to be tested in this one. Even with that said, Miami's 9th or 10th in the ACC in rush defense. Again, you played Alabama and Appalachian State, who's got some good running backs, but this, Walker's as good as it gets. Honestly, like he really looks really good. And just with the offense and kind of moving it to quarterback position, but Miami certainly linebackers, it looks like they're going to lose Keontra Smith for the year, one of their starters. So they're going to have to rotate somebody else in. It's probably Wayman Steed there. But quarterback at Michigan State there, Peyton Thorne, I thought he's looked good. It's surprising when you watch him again, only 2 games in, but didn't start much last year, young guy. I think he seems to have a good mix. He can kind of go downfield. Looks like he's got good footwork and get out a little bit. What are your impressions of Peyton so far? And obviously, quarterback plays big when you play another Power 5 conference team.
Yeah, and I think him winning the job was good for the program in this sense. They brought in, as I mentioned, so many transfers, and it was sort of a new thing in this one-time transfer rule deal, and Mel Tucker looking to flip the roster pretty quick. But they brought in a quarterback, too. Anthony Russo had been a longtime starter at Temple and has a big arm. And Peyton Thorne won that job, held him off. And so in other places where Walker comes in and he's the guy at running back, and you see that's throughout the defense, at quarterback, it wasn't like they just brought in replacements. And I think that did well for the mix of the team. Peyton Thorne's a guy who last year and didn't get a lot of opportunities, played a little bit against Ohio State, started their last game against Penn State. It wasn't supposed to be their last game, but it was the next week was canceled. And he had about a quarter and a half where he was just brilliant. And you started to go, oh, okay, wait a second. And against Northwestern, he made a few nice throws, but very much a supplemental piece in the game. They were dominating up front. A few more good throws against Youngstown State. And so he hasn't yet been in a pressure situation where they're struggling to run the ball and they need him to carry a drive. That said, he's got a lot of tools. He doesn't have the biggest arm in the world, but he's got a great touch. He's got enough zip. He sees things well. He's been playing with Jaden Reed, their top receiver, since middle school. He definitely has something to him, and he hasn't turned the ball over yet. I mean, there's a poise, and he can run quite a bit. I mean, he looks like he could be. I don't know if he'll be an NFL quarterback. But early on, he looks like a guy who could be a really, really good college quarterback, and he's only a redshirt sophomore.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I feel like that's how I feel when I watched him. Again, I haven't seen a ton of him. I didn't see him much last year, but just, these 2 games have just been impressive, with what he's been able to do. And obviously, it takes a step in facing a Miami team on the road, that noon start. We'll see how that goes. But Jaden Reed, let's talk about his playmakers. Jaden, certainly can get off and get going anytime. It seems like he, capable of the big play. And if you guys haven't seen Michigan State, they go 75-yard touchdown plays to start each game, run and pass. So flea flicker on the last one. So Jaden certainly playmaker. Also another guy to watch for in the return game. Miami gave up a kick return last week. Jaden there at punt return looks like a good threat there. So Jaden, they go Speedy Naylor. Anytime you've got a guy nicknamed that, and people that don't know, he played with Bubba Bolden at Bishop Gorman, one of those products, and he's a guy that's put up numbers too. So it seems like those two. I like what what Mosley's been able to do a little bit too. But just talk about those 2 guys, kind of the weapons that Peyton has to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I think they thought, and coming in, that was going to be the strength of the team, and both were good at times last year. I don't think that. Like Naylor has been off injured throughout his career, and finally was healthy last year. And you saw him become a much more complete receiver. He's always had great speed. In a lot of ways, the end of the D'Antonio era was badly hurt in 2019 by the fact that Jaden Reed wasn't given an eligibility waiver on his transfer from Western Michigan. He was a pretty dazzling freshman there. And then Naylor was hurt so much, and they just didn't have speed at that position, and then, or at least experience speed and guys who can separate. And these two can separate. They both got great feels for the position. They're guys that, you really can't. You're not going to double either one of them because the other one's there. And to be fair, I mean, I think both are next level players. I don't know to what extent. Neither one is like, I mean, Michigan State's had guys before like a Charles Rogers or something like that, where you're just truly in fear of what they can do. I don't know if they're there yet, but Reed especially is, he's becoming a problem for people, and he really understands the position. But Naylor's got great speed, and so they have speed, they have experience and savvy, and they've got a good connection with the quarterback. I mean, the passing game should be a strength for them, and I think they even thought that coming in. It's one of the reasons I thought, even if the offensive line hadn't looked like this and the running game hadn't looked like this, I thought the Vegas over/under projection that started at 4.5 was way low, because that when you have guys who you can throw it around a little bit, and you can make plays, you have the ability to upset somebody, right? In the past, Michigan State's been, even when they've been mediocre, have been really, really relying on that defense, and it's hard to upset very good teams 19-17. Usually you've got to win a shootout. I thought that they may have the ability this year on a given day to do that. What's happened now, and this is why the flea flicker works so well, Kenneth Walker rushes for 264. That's on film. That becomes a concern for people. And then the first play of the next game, and they use it against Youngstown. I might have held it for Miami, but you hand it to Kenneth Walker, and that's going to work. People are locked in on him, and then you get a flea flicker to Jaden Reed, and there's some other really good throws by Thorne. So that again, against limited competition, I think Northwestern has a decent secondary, and that's probably the strength of their team. But that duo has been pretty good.
And that flea flicker, you hold it against Miami, but man, you really got the home crowd excited on that one. So kind of like the Mel Tucker era is here, kind of a statement. But so Miami shortens their rotation at cornerback. They go to 3 guys. Al Blades Jr. did not get a snap there. So Miami's kind of rolling out 3 corners at this time. They're going to try to bring the heat again. And offensive line certainly going to be key for Michigan State. What's kind of standing out to you with the line? And like you said, a little bit of a question mark coming into it.
Yeah, well, they had 9 guys coming in who had started games before. And that's a lot. They had a lot of experience, some veteran guys. But there's an old line by the former Michigan State basketball coach years ago, Judd Heathcote, where he said, beginning one of his seasons, he said, there's good news and there's bad news. And he said, the good news is we've got everybody back. The bad news is we've got everybody back. And that's sort of the way that people looked at this offensive line. It's like, a lot of guys back, but I don't know what that means. What's happened is, I think on the left side, the interior, J.D. Duplain is I think he's a junior now. He's kind of maybe a sophomore, junior. He's come into it's hard to tell with the COVID year. They all have extra years, and I don't know what's going to happen. But he's really coming to his own. The Jarrett Horst transfer was a big deal, kid from Arkansas State. And that you just see those two kind of maulers on that left side. They've been able to run behind those guys. And they just got a veteran group, and they've got some depth. A guy named Luke Campbell, who was a promising player back in 2017. It's really had an injury-riddled career, is giving them some depth at tackle, which I thought was a concern for them, because in previous years they've had a lot of interior guys on the outside, and that's been a big part of the problem. But yeah, no, they've had a push, and I know it's Youngstown State, Northwestern, but there have been a lot of games that I've covered in the last few years where even against not great competition, they haven't looked like that. And so that was a noticeable improvement. Put it this way, they haven't rushed for 500 or put up 500 yards total in back-to-back games since 2014. They haven't had more than they had 595 in the last game. Hadn't had that since 2014. So they played other 1AA teams. They've played other lower level competition. They've never quite pushed people around like this. Again, no, this is now where last year they were a 2-5 football team, but they beat Northwestern, even though Northwestern won the Big Ten West, because Northwestern's talent isn't going to overwhelm you. And this is Youngstown State secondarily. Like, they have not seen pressure yet and real blitz pickups that they've had to do regularly. And Peyton Thorne hasn't felt that. I mean, this will be a brand new dynamic.
And kind of switching it to the defense, I want to get your impression of what you've seen with the Michigan State defense. I feel like Xavier Henderson looks like a good player, X-Man there in the back. I think he stands out to me, number 3, if you guys are watching. But, ability, the interception was nice against Youngstown State. I thought in the opener, the fact that they can kind of bring him in on blitzes up the middle and kind of move him around a little bit seems like a good player. Stay with the secondary a little bit. I think Michael Dow looks good too. However, I think, what you saw in the opener, they could go, they can kind of get beat a little bit over the top. I think, that can be a concern for Michigan State probably, but Miami's not shown the ability to go downfield yet this season. They're really struggling with that. A couple passes last game over 30 yards, but for the most part, there's a lot of short passes. I'm sure Miami has to see those things on film. We'll be looking to stretch the field a little bit. They like the speed they have out there. They're just not connecting with De'Aaron King and either guys getting open or play calls and kind of a combination of a lot of things in Miami's passing game not working yet. But let's stick with the Michigan State secondary and kind of in that back and how they're kind of defending the pass and maybe what to expect. And also your thoughts on Xavier, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's a nice player. They've had a pretty good run of really good safeties, and he's sort of the next in line. He had an unbelievable interception, a one-handed grab in the last game. He's just a veteran, a leader, a guy who I think will play at the next level. And what they played a few more guys, but against Northwestern, they did not play a lot of guys at safety or corner. That they kept that. I think they have a little more depth at corner. They're still trying to figure out who their top guys are. Ronald Williams transfer from Alabama, Chester Kimbrough transfer from Florida. They've got some other, Kaelon Gervin. They've got some other young players. They've got some guys they like there. It's consistency and you're right. They did get beat a couple times deep against Northwestern. And the thing they did pretty well against Northwestern is they didn't let one big play become another. Like the wheels didn't come off, but they showed that as a vulnerability on tape. And I'm sure that's something that teams are going to try to expose. Now, Youngstown State had a young quarterback who was a better runner than he was passer. That wasn't really a concern, but it will be going forward because they've shown they can be beat.
The rest of the defense, how do you kind of see it? I felt like kind of reading about Michigan State linebacker, a little bit of a question mark, losing some guys. It does, again, opponent, but it feels like this kind of front seven has done a pretty good job of kind of swarming the ball. But your thoughts on the front seven linebackers in particular, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, they were very thin going into the spring. They brought in Quavarius Crouch from Tennessee, who was a great athlete. Not always in the right place. And he's one of those guys who gets everywhere quickly, but he can get back to the right place from the wrong place. But that can be a problem for them. I mean, it is a young group, and they had 3 defensive ends out, in the last game. It'll be interesting to see if those guys are back. And that was, pandemic related. And so that sort of, that made a difference, I think, in the last game. Some other guys played pretty well, but again, it's Youngstown State. I think their defensive front's okay, though. I think, I don't know if they're dynamic on the edges, but I think they're pretty solid and deep in the middle. But they gave up some runs in the middle too, and I think that's probably the place that right now you can expose them a little bit, is your ability to run on them and do some different things there. And then if you do have the deep passing game, I think defense is still a little bit of a question. I don't know that it's going to be a great group. I think it's going to be a team that at times shows some promise and has some athletes and guys that, and against lower level competition may look really well. But I do think I think they're there to be had a little bit on the defensive side, especially this early in the season.
I think that's going to be interesting to see how this running game for Miami works. You go into the season thinking you've got 3 backs, so you could go with either all 3 of them. Jalen Knighton suspended for 4 games to start the year. Don Chaney with the injury last game, he's going to be out. Cameron Harris, it all falls on him. I don't think that they're going to give a lot of carries to the true freshmen and Cody Brown and Thad Franklin. Cam Harris is looking to break out. He wants to have one of these big performances. Like a lot of places with the Miami offense, De'Aaron King has not played well. His quarterback rating is not real good. They're not passing the ball the way they would like. I know Miami's looking to bounce back from, they get the win, but a lot of unrest right now in the Miami program with the offense. Graham, is there some things that initially, maybe early on, you feel like Michigan State, look, if they get this thing going early on, it could be a good day for the Spartans, or a bad day if they're kind of shut down in some areas? Is there some things maybe early on that might be keys in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is you keep talking about the dynamic within Miami and maybe the Boo Birds a little bit with the Appalachian State and the Alabama result. I think that there is something to, like, I don't understand why people schedule Alabama early. It's a crazy because what happens is, like, this happened to Michigan State in 2019. They had a much earlier than usual game against Ohio State. It was like October 5th with a veteran defense that thought they were going to be really, really good. They actually, for a quarter and a half, played Ohio State as well as anybody that year. But things fell apart a little bit, and that game wound up being a blowout. And it took their spirit a little bit, because that was sort of a measuring stick moment. Like, they thought they were at that level and they weren't. And then they got just creamed by Wisconsin, like 38-0 the next week, is close to a game I've seen Michigan State quit. And when I look at what Miami did, at least coming back and beating Appalachian State, which was projected to win 9 games, is a really good team, is an underrated team. Like, I think that's actually a good win in a tough spot after you've had sort of your hopes of being at the national championship level taken from you. And so what I'm curious about this game is Michigan State, on the other hand, feels very, very good about itself right now. And maybe Miami still has some more questions and some doubts or whatever. And I think those first few minutes, and if Michigan State can get, jump out again out front, or has some success early, and that confidence remains, I think that's really important. I think they've been able to play from out front because of those first 2 plays, and because of the way things have gone early in both games. They haven't had to play. I think if Michigan State falls behind, or all of a sudden physically this feels like a game where it's a different type of matchup for them, I'm curious to see the response to that sort of adversity. And likewise for Miami, and I don't know that program as well, though, but if Michigan State were to jump out and all of a sudden things don't look great again, where are their heads? I think this game early on is important for both teams, just given the way the season has started.
And kind of just touching on that Alabama game, and I think with what you kind of see is maybe a lot of Miami fans, didn't expect to win that game. But I think going into it, if you don't expect it, then when you watch it, it's hard to see what that looks like, right? You're down 27-0. It's like, man, this isn't even close. And a lot of things not working. Like you said, the players, same kind of thing. It felt like a measuring stick type thing. Look, this is a Miami team that brought back a lot of guys, a lot of guys trying to win that ACC conference, the first one in school history. That they're looking at Clemson as taking a step back without their back and Trevor. So as a Miami fan base, and again, that Appalachian State game comes up quick. And now Michigan State looks much better than you expected to start the year. Miami gets them at home. It's a noon start. Maybe a small little intangible thing would be, is Michigan State, the heat thing, is, if that's even a thing, but it'll probably be around 90 at kickoff. It looked like it was a little, maybe in the high 70s there in Lansing last weekend, but you don't know how that's going to play out because it's still a tough environment. But again, going on the road against a team like that, and maybe Miami comes out, strong, hungry, the whole thing. Maybe they get some things clicking a little bit more, because I do think that there's more to be had. I don't think this is a team that's, Mike Harley, for example, he's hardly getting catches over 10 yards. I don't think that's going to continue. I think they'll find a way to get Will Mallory more involved, has some ability there. And then we'll kind of see how De'Aaron King plays. We've not seen him play like this. I think there's more to be had there. His completion percent's good, but just not getting the ball downfield enough. And I think it's an interesting game. Again, I think it's 2 programs, kind of, Power 5 conference schools. These are great in the non-conference schedule to see it, and kind of just, it's only 2 games, but just seeing the trajectory of kind of where things are going for both programs, it's very interesting. So yeah, it's any X factors, Graham, any guys we didn't touch on that you're like, man, this guy maybe something to watch for. I mentioned the Appalachian State game. I felt like the kick return guy. I was like, man, you guys got to watch this guy, and he goes off with a 100-yard score. So is there anything in particular that we didn't touch on that you want to wrap this thing up with maybe a guy or two to watch for that could make plays?
Well, Michigan State hasn't returned a punt for a touchdown since 2011, so I don't think Miami needs to worry too much about that. But although Jaden Reed has taken over that position and looked all right, you mentioned the new kickoff and the heat, and they played a few years ago at Arizona State in September, and that was just like 100 degrees. It's the dry heat, but it was brutal. And there aren't many guys. There are a few guys left from that, but what they have done, and I've been over there for a few interview sessions. We had a stretch of 90-degree days, day after day after day, for about 2 weeks in August. And then when it cooled down, they practiced indoors instead of outdoors, where they could jack up the heat to above 90 degrees in there. And so you could just feel so I think, we have humidity here. I don't know that will be an enormous issue for them this early in the season. I do, the noon start, Miami sun, all that stuff. I mean, who knows? In terms of X factor players, that's a good question. I think if this is a game, the other thing that hasn't happened yet is their kicker, who's a sixth-year guy who's been very good at times in his career and not as great in others, has been just okay. And he has not had to take a pressure kick yet, though. They've been in control of these games. And this game feels like it'll be a lot closer than what they've dealt with, and it'll feel a lot closer. It won't not just on the scoreboard, but it'll feel like every point might matter. And I'm curious to see how he does. And because they tried a 60-yarder that didn't come close. He had a 50-yarder that didn't come close. He's had a couple kicks go in, but I don't think there's not a lot of reasons to trust him yet. And I think those are things to watch, because I think they understand this is probably a game you can't leave points on the board.
Yeah, and that's definitely a positive for Miami. You go with the freshman kicker, makes a pressure kick, 2 minutes left in the game, drills a 43-yarder. So you get those things early on, and now you kind of feel good about yourself. Momentum, you would think, moving forward from the Miami standpoint, and as far as Andy goes too, just that confidence that you've done it. So yeah, Graham, man, I definitely appreciate you for jumping on here. A lot to talk about. Very interesting game right here in week 3. So definitely appreciate you, and hopefully take care, man.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
All right.